LSU dominates BYU in the Dome as Matt Canada's offense and Dave Aranda's defense begin their season in spectacular fashion. Plus, a tremendous start for Tulane, who might have found its quarterback of the future. And Southeastern goes down in OT, while Nichols takes down McNeese. The Saints' 53-man roster is set, so which players who made the squad were the biggest surprises? And we'll discuss 10 of the metro area's best prep football players.
This is the last word on sports. 4th Down on 4 starts now.
What a start for Ed Orgeron and the LSU Tigers. A completely dominating effort against a pretty good BYU team. I'm Doug Mouton. Welcome to 4th Down on 4. 13 players didn't play for LSU. Orgeron wouldn't confirm, but they're believed to be opening day suspensions. But it didn't matter. Saturday night in the Superdome.
Thunder, feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Thunder, feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Thunder, thunder.
Come on, let's go take us a phone. Come on. Ed Orgeron's first full season as LSU's head coach could not have gotten off to a better start. Darius Geis and the Tiger offense ran through and wore down an overmatched BYU front. And Dave Aranda's defense was spectacular. With 4 freshmen starting, the Tigers shut out BYU.
If you told me that we'd hold these guys to 0 points, I would say we want to, but you just never know. But, I mean, that was special. That was a special performance tonight.
Special in a lot of ways. Last year, the Cougars averaged 29 points a game. They've been to a bowl game for 12 straight years. But Saturday night, LSU held BYU to -5 rushing yards. The Cougars never crossed midfield, and LSU gave up fewer than 100 total yards, and they knew it.
You can have a great performance, but it could be, 200 yards total, 300 yards total, but play well. And then when we saw it in the fourth quarter, it was like 97 yards. We're like, no, we're staying in. Like, we got to keep going.
I knew on the sideline, we knew it. We were looking up there, checking the yards and everything, and we just said, keep holding them. And as a unit, we played very well.
Some of the stats from this game were crazy. BYU only ran 38 offensive plays. In the Big 12, they run 90 plays a game sometimes. BYU ran 38 plays. LSU ran the ball 57 times.
We ran it 57 times?
57 times as a team. Is that just the way it played out, or did you think that was coming?
Man, that's LSU football. We run the ball. We got to set the tone. Everybody knew we were running the ball. It's going to happen.
I would say that's crazy. We're going in. We didn't know we was going to run the ball 50 times. That was unexpected.
Some weeks we're going to throw the ball a lot. Some weeks we won't have to. And this is one of the weeks that we didn't have to.
Ed Orgeron gave Matt Canada's play calling an A+. He said Canada was on fire. In the first quarter, Canada dialed up Darius Geis 13 times, and that set the tone. When you know you got it 20 times, you know they're not going to give it to you 40, right?
Who knows? Coach Canada crazy. He might.
Our offensive line, we can miss a block or block it completely wrong, and he'll still get 5 yards. And that's just the beautiful thing about having a back like Darius and Darryl.
Geis finished with 27 carries. John Ehret's Darrell Williams had 15. LSU had so much success running it, they were able to withhold a lot of Canada's offense.
All the first down passes, all the intermediate passes. I mean, there's a lot of stuff he didn't have to run, but he had it on his call sheet. He gave me a call sheet about like that, and I guarantee he might have used 10% of it.
There's a lot more that we could definitely use, but you guys saw it. There's a lot of motion and shift. There's a lot of unbalance and adjustments that defenses have to make, and they were forced to kind of play soft and kind of play back on their heels, and sometimes the 4, 5, 6 yard run isn't sexy, but it's a very efficient thing. It's a very tough thing to do against a quality defense.
And it certainly appears offseason back surgery has helped Danny Etling in a big way. Etling looked more nimble. He said he felt healthy, and he did a lot right. He was 14 of 17, no sacks, no turnovers. This third quarter strike to Russell Gage might have been Etling's best play in a terrific overall performance.
I thought he did a great job, exactly what we asked him to do tonight.
Danny played phenomenal. I thought he managed the game very well. He didn't force anything, and he played within the offense, and that's all he needs to do, and he ended up having a great night.
It wasn't perfect. Ed Ogeron said LSU will work on its red zone efficiency, and he called the 10 penalties first game jitters. But 23 freshmen played and played well, and you can probably expect a bunch of those suspended guys to add a boost in week 2.
I expect our guys that were not here tonight to bounce back and have a great week next week.
All year long, baby, all year long.
That's Chattanooga at home Saturday. The SEC schedule begins the following week at Mississippi State. And if Saturday night's performance is any indication, LSU looks ready. 1 week in, Dave Aranda's defense is among America's elite. First in rushing defense, first in scoring defense. The Tigers are one of 7 teams to pitch a shutout. Third in first downs allowed with just 6, and 5th in total defense with 97 yards allowed. That's in America. After the game, we caught up with one of the best who covers LSU. All right, joined by Ross Dellinger, who covers LSU for our partners at The Advocate. All right, first of all, holding a BYU team, a West Coast team that puts up a ton of points, holding them to under 100 yards, that's beyond expectations, isn't it?
Yeah, it was impressive, especially when you look at the hurdles they had across with the freshmen. I mean, they basically played, 4 true freshmen in starting roles and another redshirt freshman, and then they were without their best defensive player, Arden Key. So, down basically 3 defensive starters, LSU holds a team under 100 yards. That's pretty promising moving forward.
And you would expect the suspensions to be for 1 game, at least most of them. You would suspect this defense can get better, at least personnel-wise, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, a lot of these are usually, it's kind of a season opening tradition, it seems like, at LSU. All the bad stuff players did in the offseason comes back to haunt them on the season opener. That's where they get penalized. And so I would imagine that most, there was 13, and I'm not sure all of them were suspended, but you could probably make a guess that the majority was. I would say you've got to think at least 9, 10, 11 will be back, next week.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
And moving uptown, after finishing 4-8 last season, Willie Fritz needed a fast start to turn things around in year 2 at Tulane, and the Green Wave got it. They rolled over Grambling 43-14, as Leslie Spoon reports.
Tulane knew it wouldn't be easy replacing defensive leaders Tanzel Smart and Nico Marley, but they made it look easy. Grambling quarterback Devontae Kincaid finished just 15 of 26 for 148 yards. The reigning SWAC Offensive Player of the Year faced pressure all night. He was sacked twice and threw an interception.
We worked as much as we could on rush lanes, attacking the quarterback with leverage. We knew that his escape path was always outside.
The defense played well, but the offense is the story. JUCO transfer quarterback Jonathan Banks is the missing piece.
I thought for his first game, I thought Jonathan Banks showed a lot of poise and made some really good decisions. And then also, you get a lot of one-on-one opportunities with the quarterback out on the perimeter. And there's 3 or 4 times they had it played fairly well, and it still was a gain of 5 or 6 yards for us.
Banks can run it, rushing for a team-high 69 yards on 16 carries. But the difference is Banks can also throw the ball. He finished the night 10 of 15 for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was the difference.
We got to be multi-dimensional, because sometimes if they really want to take away the run, they can do it. If they want to pack the box in there, and they do. And so I was pleased with our ability to throw the football while they were stymieing us in the run game.
Now that Fritz has the right guy leading the charge, he'll be able to open up his offense. So Saturday night was just a preview. Leslie Spoon, 4th Down on 4.
All right, thanks, Leslie. Still ahead tonight, Inside LSU Football is next at 11:05. Then Eric Ritchie hosts Tulane football with Coach Willie Fritz. Relax, make some popcorn. We've got a full hour of football after we're done with 4th Down on 4. It's all here on Channel 4. 1 week in, there are big reasons for optimism at both Southeastern and Nichols. The Colonels got a Southland Conference win. The Lions nearly pulled a major upset.
Sets up the play action.
On the road at UL Lafayette, and the Lions put on an offensive show. Lorenzo Nunez threw for 3 touchdowns. Southeastern rolled up 514 yards of total offense against a Ragin' Cajun team that went to the New Orleans Bowl last season. Under a minute to go, Nunez to Niger Jackson, a 29-yard touchdown. It got Southeastern to within 1. Ron Roberts elects to go for the win. But on the two-pointer, the Ragin' Cajuns get a sack, a fumble, and a 2-point return. UL Lafayette beats Southeastern 51-48. The Lions host Bethune-Cookman at Strawberry Stadium Saturday night.
You can smell football in the air.
Tim Rebo's Nichols Colonels open their season with a Rummel Raider to Rummel Raider combination, leading them to a huge win.
He's got his man.
Chase Fourcade hit Damien Jean-Pierre with this spinning 62-yard beauty in the first quarter against McNeese. Then trailing late in the third, Fourcade threw it up for Jean-Pierre, and number 3 did the rest. Jean-Pierre changes directions a couple times, and the Cowboys couldn't wrangle him. Nichols hadn't beaten McNeese in 8 years, but on the game's final play, Lauren Fonseca is ice water from 32 yards out. Colonels win 37-35. They'll play at Texas A&M Saturday. Coming up, we'll turn our attention to the Saints, who have their final roster and practice squad set. We'll discuss a few roster surprises and which defensive player could be poised for a big season. And later, Landry Walker receiver Devontae Jason is one of the best prep players in South Louisiana. We'll discuss the impact he'll have, as well as 9 other standouts as the 2017 season begins.
4th Down on 4 is sponsored by Hyman Bartolo Jr. Contractors.
The Saints practice squad is set for now. They added Christian McCaffrey's brother Max on Sunday to go with New Orleans Arthur Millette, LSU's Traven Durrell, and former CFL star Adam Bighill. Leslie Spoon takes a look at the final cuts.
There weren't a lot of surprises with the Saints' 53-man roster. The most interesting was New Orleans keeping undrafted rookie running back Trey Edmonds. That makes 5 running backs on the roster. Edmonds, whose father was an NFL tight end, must have really impressed them with special teams play. Teron Armstead was moved off the PUP list to the active roster, which means he's on track to return within the first 6 weeks of the season. Including Armstead, there are 8 offensive linemen on the roster. Josh Laribas was retained at center, perhaps as a precaution since Max Unger's coming off foot surgery. The Saints kept 10 defensive linemen, including a pair of rookie draft picks, and D-tackle Mitchell Lavin, whose father also played in the NFL. Lavin makes the cut after a strong camp. He was undrafted and sat out his entire rookie season last year after foot surgery. Many believed 2015 first-round pick Stephon Anthony would be cut after barely playing last season and missing most of training camp with injury, but he survived. Some of the surprise cuts, linebacker Michael Motti, who was a special teams captain last year and battled a serious illness to get back to playing shape in time for camp, and former 5th-round pick Damian Swann. Veteran running back Travaris Cadet was a victim of the numbers in a crowded backfield. An injury in camp didn't help. Now Cadet hopes he'll catch on with another team.
All that I can do now as a veteran is worry about what I can control, just be prepared, keep working hard, and take it a day at a time, and get ready for what God has the next chapter.
Quarterback Garrett Grayson didn't do enough to stay around either. The former 3rd-round pick is the 4th member of the Saints' 2015 draft class to be released. Grayson says he believes he deserves to be in the NFL and thinks another team will pick him up, but he wanted to be a part of the 2017 Saints.
You know, whether people see it or not, I think, you know, this team can go a long ways, and, you know, whether I'm here or not, I'm excited for them.
The roster will, of course, fluctuate throughout the season, but the Saints believe this is the right core to turn things around in 2017. Doug?
All right, thanks, Leslie. Joined by our friend Joel Erickson, who, of course, covers the Saints for our partners at The Advocate. Your most surprising made the roster, and it's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, no, running back Trey Edmonds, he's a guy who only had 44 yards rushing in the preseason. But I went back and looked, and the Saints clearly gave him an extended look on special teams in the preseason finale. He hadn't had more than 10 snaps before that game, 22 in the preseason finale, and they must have liked what they saw because all the other guys who had that many snaps on special teams ended up getting cut.
Wow, and the Saints clearly made an effort to improve the special teams, and I don't mean Morstead and Lutz. I mean Trey Edmonds, Chris Banjo, Nate Stupar. Those are 3 guys you could probably say made this team almost wholly to play special teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, Stupar played a lot of defense last year, but in this linebacking core, you'd think he was the special teams leader in tackles last year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's a big deal. Chris Banjo had an unreal 4 tackles against the Chargers. Those are guys. The other thing is interesting is they brought veterans. Like, you know, a lot of times you think of young guys on special teams, but it's veterans for these for the Saints, and I think it's because they had trouble on coverage teams and trouble on special teams last year, and you don't want to have that again. It lost them games last year.
Right, and to me, one of the best stories, and an obvious guy who had to be on the 53 is Mitchell Laban, the defensive lineman from Arkansas. Of course, he's from Hawaii, which is a great story. But to me, he was so good in the preseason that he became a no-doubter by the end, and it's a great story, isn't it?
Oh, it's a fantastic story. He's a guy who was kind of unrecruited, basically. He went to, there's this thing called an all-poly camp, and he was the defensive player of the camp or whatever, and no one picked him up. And the guy who ran the camp had some contacts in college and knew an Arkansas coach. The next thing you know, he's walking on there. He's played like 6 positions since he's gotten to college, both on offense and defense. Really great story, but you see some of the movement skills he had when he played tight end or linebacker at his size, both as a pass rusher. He was great in the pass rush. And then as a special teamer, 290-pound guys aren't supposed to be able to do what he can do. Right. And it's very helpful on a Saints team that likes to have some of those big guys on special teams.
Do you think this team can make a jump defensively, be significantly better defensively?
I mean, I don't, depends on significant. I don't know that we're going to have like a top 10 defense here in New Orleans, but I think that some of the stuff we've seen in the preseason, you can see where they've got a chance to really be better. We haven't seen anybody do some of the stuff that A.J. Klein's done in limited snaps, but we've seen him do some really nice stuff at linebacker. I mentioned that edge rush position. Marshawn Lattimore looks like he can really be a player, especially in man-to-man as a rookie. So it feels like a deeper defense. It feels like a defense that has more guys that were targeted, more guys that were drafted or free agent pickups, less undrafted spots coming in. And I think that's got to add up to something.
I would agree completely. It is guarded optimism, but optimism, no doubt. Right. Joel Erickson, terrific job as always. We're back with more 4th Down on 4 in a minute. Still ahead, Prep Football analyst Renee Nadeau reveals his top 10 players from the metro area and which ones have an opportunity to make a huge jump this football season. Welcome back to 4th Down on 4. One of our favorite things to do every year is to go through the best prep recruits with our good friend Renee Nadeau. All right, Renee, your top 10 list starts with the kid that I think is number 1 as well, and that's Devontae Jason, the outstanding wide receiver at Landry Walker. What do you like about him?
He's got an NFL-type body, acrobatic, Odell Beckham-type catches. He is a game changer. Defenses have to know where he is, and he's going to carry that to the next level in college. He's committed to Kansas right now, but a lot of schools, including LSU, working on him.
You think he stays at Kansas?
50-50.
50-50, I would agree. In Kansas, of course, because Tony Hull from Warren Easton is at Kansas. And I know your number 2 is a close one because it's another wide receiver, Jamar Chase, the outstanding wideout at Rummel, right?
Yeah, and you know, he's a long jump champ last year, over 24 feet in the long jump, a 4'5" guy. He's thick, 6'1", 200 pounds, very physical. 11 touchdowns last year, Doug, over 27 yards per catch. He is a big-time receiver.
Yeah, he is terrific. All right, let's go through the whole top 10. It is Devontae Jason at number 1, Jamar Chase at number 2, another wide receiver, Lawrence Keys of McDonough 35 at 3, then Corian Harris, the cornerback from Landry Walker, then Joe Fuchsia, the defensive back at McDonough 35, Jamal Houston from John Ehret, the wide receiver, then Glenn Beal, the tight end at John Curtis, Aaron Brule, the DB from Rummel, Puka Williams, the outstanding tailback at Hanville, and Isaiah Windman from John Ehret. He, of course, a defensive back. Now, we had a year a couple of years ago, Renee, where we had Rougarou Alexander at St. Thomas Aquinas, and we had Glenn Logan at Destrehan. We had some defensive tackles. This is a more typical New Orleans area list, right? It's all wide receivers and DBs.
It really is. I had 50, a top 50, actually 52 because there were ties, but out of that top 52, you had 12 wide receivers and 17 DBs. So if you're looking for skill, the metro area in 2018 recruiting class is the place to be.
And it usually is. That's not unusual. And I know you got a guy, I always ask you for a guy that's not in the top 10 that you think could rise, has big-time potential. And you wanted to talk about a kid at De La Salle, defensive tackle Jamyron James.
Jamyron James is undersized. He's a little under 6'1", about 280. Squats an all-time record at De La Salle, 630 pounds. He wrestled. And let me tell you something, Doug. In time, if he stays a commitment at Tulane, he could be a Tanzel Smart type of player with that type of impact. He has a great motor, very physical, and he's a leader in the locker room.
And you would expect Willie Fritz to make some more inroads this year. This will be his third time recruiting the New Orleans area. From an LSU standpoint, because we get that question a lot, how would you say LSU is doing among your best in the New Orleans area?
Very, very good. And you can throw Javonte Jason there. Even though Jamar Chase is already committed to Florida, LSU is on him. And there's others right now that in that top 10 they're working on, but LSU's in great shape, and right, you know, as long as they got Matt Canada and Dave Aranda, a lot of people are looking at them.
Yeah, you get the feeling that people are going to see the game this week and said, I'd sure like to play there. Renee, terrific job as always. We are back with more 4th Down on 4 in a minute. Week 1 of the prep football season got us off to a great start. Since we didn't talk about Puka Williams, we'll show you his terrific stiff arm right there. Puka and the Hahnville Tigers got a win. For the best in prep football, tune in to 4th Down Friday. It's Friday night at 10:15. It is a fast, fun 20 minutes, and it's right here on Channel 4. And we'll be back next Sunday night on 4th Down on 4 to preview the Saints opener in Minnesota. We're out of time. Thanks for watching. Have a great Labor Day holiday.